I'm Greg Baise, President and CEO of the Illinois Manufacturers Association. I'm joined here today by Mark Denzler, our COO and Chief Lobbyist here in Springfield. I gave a speech about a month ago in Chicago highlighting the urgent need for change in Springfield and a call really to arms about the loss of manufacturing jobs in this state. We have lost over 300,000 jobs since the turn of the century. We have lost jobs in all parts of the state. 40% of the manufacturing jobs in the Chicagoland region have disappeared. We have seen job losses of 25 to 30% in all the major urban areas throughout the state. And yet no one seems to be alarmed at the fact that the loss of these jobs really means a disappearing middle class in this state. Those 300,000 people who are no longer working in manufacturing in this state represent families who were providing good middle-class jobs for their communities, an opportunity to cause growth in those communities, the opportunity to provide for education opportunities for their children. And yet there seems to not be an urgent need here in Springfield to address this particular problem. I also want you to remember, if nothing else from today, the following numbers. 171,000 jobs net increase have been created in Michigan, 83,000 jobs in Indiana, 79,000 jobs net in Ohio. And yet Illinois in the same time period when I gave this speech had a net increase of 4,600 jobs. Well, the statistics just came out yesterday, and last month alone in August, we had a decrease of 4,400 jobs in this state in the manufacturing sector. So essentially, since 2000, we have just maintained the number of jobs, no growth whatsoever, as our surrounding states have done that. And you ask yourself, why is that occurring? What's really different in Illinois versus Ohio, or Indiana, or Michigan, or Iowa, or Kentucky? Well, the question is, I believe, a job growth climate that is not really there in this state as it is in other states throughout the Midwest. And so we have called for a middle-class manufacturing agenda. And we believe the state of Illinois needs to do some things to make business owners, and we'll talk about what they think here in just a little bit, but to show business owners that Illinois is serious about attracting and keeping manufacturing jobs. First, we need to get the state's fiscal house in order. Business people look at the way the state is being operated and they just can't believe that we have $10 billion in backlog bills, a pension system that is a $100 billion obligation. And they ask themselves, what's going to be the day and when is the day coming that we're going to be asked to pay for those particular problems? We think regulatory reform is necessary. Workers' compensation is the top of that list. You have seen Mark and I in this building for the last several years talk about the need for workers' comp changes. And why is that? Well, those is the most often cited reason for businesses in the manufacturing arena of not wanting to expand or grow jobs in this state. And when Illinois competes for new construction, new jobs to be brought to this state, the workers' compensation system is first cited as a reason why Illinois often loses out. We think that the state's tax code does need to be overhauled. We believe that if there indeed is going to be any additional revenues to address that fiscal house, getting it in order, that those kind of regulatory reforms are absolutely necessary. And if we are going to raise taxes, let's do it in a smart way. Let's broaden the base of taxes, best policies and taxes to have a broad base being asked to pay for the various programs the state needs. We think that property taxes is also an additional cause of the loss of manufacturing jobs. In Chicago especially, as I cited earlier, 40% of the manufacturing jobs in the last 15 years have left the Cook County area. Cook County being the only county in the state that has a classification system that puts the commercial and industrial tax rate higher, we believe is the culprit, one of the major culprits for that job loss there. And finally, we believe that the workforce education system must be addressed in this state. We, like other states, are losing manufacturing workers are retiring. And in Illinois, we estimate that 35,000 production workers a year are retiring in this state. 5,000 engineers are needed to replace those workers who are retiring as well. We have to retool our education system at the community college and high school level to be able to help train the workers that are needed for the manufacturing workspace of tomorrow. Illinois can compete for new manufacturing jobs and advanced manufacturing, for the kind of jobs that are necessary in this state because of our location and because of the different sectors that are here. We can compete for those jobs if we believe, get those kinds of items in order. I'm going to ask Mark to say a couple of words. Mark interacts a lot with our members and heading up our membership department, and allow him to give a couple of comments as well.
Thank you, Greg. Mark Denzler, Vice President, Chief Operating Officer with the Illinois Manufacturers Association. And I really just want to echo what Greg has said. We've lost 304,000 manufacturing jobs since the start of the decade. And as Greg indicated, the most telling numbers are what's happened since June of 2009. As he said, Michigan has grown 171,000 manufacturing jobs, Indiana 83,000, Ohio 76,000, Wisconsin 44,000. Until last month, Illinois had gained 4,600. That's less than half of what Idaho had gained. Idaho had gained 9,100 manufacturing jobs. With a loss of 4,400 last month since June of 2009, we have a net manufacturing growth of 200 jobs. It's anemic. Quite frankly, it's embarrassing. These, as Greg indicated, are middle-class jobs. They create, they're good jobs. They're not faceless, nameless statistics. Every manufacturing worker that's lost his job, they have a family, may not be able to buy a car, go on vacation, put their kids through school. And I want to talk particularly about workers' compensation. You've heard us talk about it before. Illinois has the 7th highest cost of workers' compensation in the United States. In 2005, before Governor Blagojevich and the Democrat General Assembly increased indemnity benefits, we were 23rd highest. We vaulted to the 3rd highest cost in the country. After the 2011 reforms, we've seen a little bit of relief. We're at the 7th highest cost of workers' compensation. And we hear legislators all the time that they're standing up for the middle class. Well, quite frankly, their policies have been destroying the middle class jobs. And I want to talk about 2 specific work comp issues. When we hear opponents say, well, they're going to hurt injured workers or they're going to harm the middle class. First, I want to talk about the medical costs. Workers' compensation for a surgeon pay 369% of Medicare. So if Greg and I both have a rotator cuff, we go to the exact same surgeon at the exact same hospital, I'm covered by work comp and Greg is not, my surgeon is going to get 369% more than Medicare would pay. And if it's private insurance that covers it, it's about 250% more than private insurance. You know, why is that? Why would a doctor performing the exact same surgery get paid 369% more than Medicare? And second, talking about the indemnity benefits that the Democrats increased in 2005. You do a comparison. So there's a number of weeks associated with the loss of a function in your arm, for example. In Illinois, if you have loss to the function of your arm, you get paid $470,000. The national average, $169,000. So again, why are we paying 2.5 times more in Illinois than the average state? We're not saying we want to be 49th or 50th. We want to be average, you know. It's not necessarily a stamp to say, hey, let's be average, but in work comp, if we could just somehow be competitive, because as Greg said, we hear more about workers' compensation than any other issue from our members. We have seen companies that have left Illinois specifically citing the cost of workers' compensation. Modern Drop Forge in Blue Island. There was a recently one in a shutter company in Jacksonville that moved to Missouri. So this is paramount. We can get it done. We can save money for employers without jeopardizing care for injured workers. They're not going to see a reduction in any kind of benefit. And so we really need to focus on workers' compensation. And then Greg said, you know, tax relief, the research and development tax credit, 4 times in 13 years it's gone away. We have about 450 corporate R&D headquarters in Illinois. We're starting to see some of those move out of state. For manufacturing, research and development is the lifeblood. You have to build new products, create new products. Many of you are recording this on your phones. If you have an iPhone, the 7th generation is coming out. 7 generations in 10 years. It takes research and development. Illinois right now is without an R&D credit. We want to attract advanced manufacturing jobs, high-tech jobs, pharmaceutical jobs. We don't have an R&D credit. You have to have stability and predictability. So it's time for members of the General Assembly and both parties and both chambers and the governor's office to work together to get Illinois' economy moving again. Thank you.
And let me just, one other statistic that's important. The average manufacturing job is $75,000 a year. Those pharmaceutical research jobs that Mark mentioned, on the most part, those jobs average over $100,000 a year. So why a state like Illinois doesn't have a permanent research and development tax credit to encourage companies, not just pharmaceutical, but research and development for all manufacturers are important, that needs to be there. There seems to be a rallying cry, and you've seen it here in the Capitol, the fight for 15, the fight over minimum wage. Minimum wage is not an issue that our members really face because they pay higher amounts than that. But the fight for 15 creates $31,000 a year jobs. What we're fighting for on average is $75,000 a year jobs and a sector of the state's economy that's still 12.5% of the state's GDP. So if that answers some questions.
This whole thing is why we elected Governor Rauner 2 years ago. Why hasn't he done it?
Well, we're very disappointed that it hasn't been done, and that Governor Rauner continues to fight. We support his efforts in the workers' compensation. He talks about that all the time. Our friends on the Democratic side of the aisle, we've worked with them in making changes on workers' comp. The Democrats in the House were fully supportive of the 2011 reforms. That's why we think it's important that we've got to get this fist fight over with about the budget so that we can get kinds of reforms in workers' comp and the other things we've talked about here today. And we're supportive of the governor's efforts. We think that he's on the right track of that, and we urge that they get about that business as soon as they get back here after November.
Yeah, he's gonna say, I want your vote again. And it's gonna be sooner than you think, because it's always election season. What's he gonna be able to point to as a success that is gonna win our confidence for a second term?
Well, I'm not here to comment on what's going to be his reelection campaign efforts. We're here today to say the kinds of issues that he's talking about are exactly the kind of issues should have been brought to the fore. I've stood at this podium before decrying the lack of executive leadership in this state in both the Blagojevich and Quinn era. At least Governor Rauner has brought a program to the fore, and he's brought a program that can make some of the positive changes that we can be very supportive of.
So are you saying that the disagreement lies with Madigan and the Democrats and not everybody else?
What do you mean by
Well, I
just?
mean, you're saying that you're talking about the governor's brought this stuff, and, I mean, you make it sound like everything that's, as far as business growth and changes is being held up inside the House Democrats. I mean,
I didn't say. I think in the speech I gave a month ago, I said we're all at fault, that we've met the enemy and the enemy is us. Our citizenry has allowed for a government to exist here in Springfield to not solve problems. So it's not lost on us that we're talking about this in the campaign season as members of the General Assembly are knocking on doors and asking for the vote. We are distributing digital ads right now across the state in critical areas, trying to say to people, look, ask your members of the General Assembly. We're not advocating for Democrat, we're not advocating for Republican. We're saying, ask them these tough questions. Why have we lost these jobs? It's not lost on people in Rock Island, Decatur, places like that, that are saying, what's happened here? Where are these jobs going? Why can't we compete for them? And there would have been a certain numbers of jobs lost in the last 15 years just because automation and things of that nature, that productivity changes that manufacturers have been able to accomplish. But it's really about when we're making decisions, am I going to put a capital project in this facility, or am I going to make that decision for one in Ohio? And that business owner or that corporate structure that may be making that decision from Belgium or somewhere in Germany, they need to be able to say, Illinois is on the right track. It's a good reason to stay there.
Has the governor taken his eye off the ball in recent weeks with his shift from focus on issues like workers' compensation and things like that that really matter to your members to focusing on more political issues like term limits and redistricting reform that won't even take effect for a decade?
A governor has a lot of issues in the fore that they have to be about. I hear him still talk about workers' compensation. That's still one of the issues that would have to be resolved before a budget agreement comes together right now. And he has made that very clear, as you recall, at the end of the session. The workers' comp was at the top of his list.
And back on workers' comp, you mentioned the 2011 reforms. One thing that people, particularly on the Democratic side, have said is that insurance companies are holding on to a lot of those savings and not passing them along to their customers and your members. Do you agree with that? I'm
going to let Mark is a member of the Work Comp Advisory Board. That is a group of business and labor that oversees and watches what's going on at the Work Comp Commission, and he can address that.
I would tell you, I think that's a red herring that the opponents, the trial lawyers and labor unions use to try to deflect. Illinois is a very competitive work comp state. There's more than 300 carriers that write work comp insurance. And if that were the case, you have those that buy insurance through the work comp insurers, and you have self-insured. If that was the case, that the insurers were keeping the money or profiting, you would see no savings there, but you would see the self-insureds with the big savings, and you don't see that. I would further note that I think the single largest work comp carrier in Illinois has about 3% of the market. So it's not like you have a monopoly of one or two companies controlling. I think that is simply a red herring to deflect from the fact that we need additional changes that they're opposed to.
Does the causation standard for workers' compensation have to change in order for you to see the types of benefits you want to see, or are there other ways of making changes that could result in the savings?
Causation is certainly very important. There's no doubt about that. For those of you that aren't aware, Illinois is an A-cause state, meaning that if the employer's workplace is a cause of the injury or aggravation, then the employer can be on the hook for 100% of that. You've seen a case recently in Springfield at Northgate Suites, the hotel on the east side several years ago, where they'd hired a housekeeper. She worked for him for about 6 or 7 weeks, claimed a double carpal tunnel, and they had to pay about a $40,000 word plus medical, total $100,000. So causation is certainly very important. There's a number of things. We've talked about the medical costs. We've talked about indemnity payments. There's a number of factors that all play into it.
Can you elaborate a bit more on how detrimental it is that Illinois does not have a R&D tax credit, and the impetus on lawmakers to get that done to give some certainty to manufacturers?
Well, it's a part of a whole list of items that have fallen by the wayside. The manufacturer's purchase credit, as an example, is expired. The R&D, and we emphasize the pharmaceutical companies just because the research and things that go into that part of the sector, but it's all across the board of companies doing and improving their product to be able to be competitive around the world. And so it just sticks out like a sore thumb by the fact that we don't have it. Is it a contributing factor for job loss in this state? By itself, probably not. But it is the part of the whole collection of the attitude that Illinois policymakers seem to take toward business. That if we can find another regulation, let's enact it. If we can push another lawsuit, an example, some of you may have seen this just last week, the Supreme Court decided, it was called the Bayer case, and it was about medical payments and future medical payments into the future for an injured worker, that trial lawyers are now, quote, entitled to 20% of that medical cost that's paid into the future. That was usually not the case before that. So someone needs to explain to me how that helps the injured worker. Injured worker is still going to receive the medical benefit. It's now just going to cost more because trial lawyers are going to get that 20% of that future medical payment. Doesn't help the injured worker. It only increases cost into a $3 billion system that's out there, and that's what workers' comp is on the average each year.
One additional on the research and development credit. And so last year, Illinois exported about $65 billion worth of goods. 93% were manufactured products. So if you don't have research and development and you don't build products and improve on products, you don't have anything to offer the marketplace. You don't have anything to sell here in the United States or overseas. So that's why it's critically important. And we're starting to see companies move their R&D facilities outside of Illinois because there's no certainty. Our members aren't looking, what are we going to build next year? They're looking 5, 10, 15, even 20 years down the road. And the fact that this has turned on and off 4 times in the last 13 years just gives them no stability and predictability.
Can you cite an example of a company that's moved its R&D operations outside the state?
I can talk to you afterwards about it. Some, I don't know if I want to say publicly, they may have not announced, and so I can talk to you after about 1 or 2.
And then the education aspect
necessarily, but can, you know, do machine operation? How important is that early on?
It's very important. IMA is involved with a federal grant as we speak, $4 million, where we are involved in working with the German American Chamber of Commerce, a consortium of community colleges to help promote apprenticeships. In the German system, the European system of apprenticeships, the average age of an apprentice is 17 years old. In the United States, where they are offered, is 23 years old. We need to really gear our secondary education system to be able to identify young people who are both, whether in the STEM area that they have performed well, are not going to go on to a 4-year traditional liberal arts school. Those kinds of young people, to give them the opportunity to find a certificate, whether it be a welding certificate as an example, the American Welding Society, to other certificates that for people who are machine operators, the ability to go into a manufacturing facility, run a CNC machine, which is a machine that is cutting things and whatever precisely. The ability not only to push the buttons to make that machine work, but how you program that machine. Those are the kind of opportunities in our community college system, and there are successes around the state that are doing that. In fact, we have recognized several of the community colleges that are doing a good job there. We need to have more of an alignment, I think, with both the elementary, secondary education system, the community college system, to be able to promote more of that, because as those numbers I cited earlier, the retirees that are just there, let alone the vacancies that occur every day in a manufacturing facility, needs the skilled workforce trained for those opportunities.
Can you address the critique that a return to manufacturing means jobs for robots and not necessarily jobs for people?
I've attended 2 major trade shows this year, one in Hanover, Germany, and then 2 weeks ago in Chicago, the largest manufacturing machining show in the country. Every square foot of McCormick Place was filled with different machines. The idea of what is coming and what's there, of the machines that will be working in the manufacturing workspace of the future, is unbelievable to see. But those machines don't just magically appear. They just don't show up in a facility. They've got to be built. They've got to be able to be placed. They've got to be run. So those are the jobs of the future that are out there. And again, goes back to the education issue. Are we going to have workforce available here in Illinois to do that? Let me tell you a positive story instead of just being negative. I a member who has a facility in Lake County, has a facility out in western Illinois, and he moved a facility out of Cook County for the property tax reason that we cited, moved it to Tennessee. So we're talking, and he said, you know, my workplace down in Tennessee's, you know, it was good. I mean, we were able to be more competitive with that product. Tennessee was very good at helping us set up everything in that regard. But you know what? The workforce there, even though they gave us all the training opportunity, is still just not as good as my workforce in Savannah or in Lake County. And it shows that we have that kind of workforce and skilled people who can be trained in this state. We just need to promote that. And it's the kind of thing that we're going to have in the future. It's not going to be all robots with one guy pushing a button at the start of the day and having it go.
You guys want to sound off at all in national politics?
Sure.
All right, so which candidate you think is going to bring more manufacturing jobs back to the U.S.?
I'm disappointed in both candidates' stand on trade. What they talk about, Donald Trump talks about terrible NAFTA has been. He's going to repeal it, whatever he's going to do right off the get-go. Absolutely could be devastating to the Illinois economy, both in agriculture and manufacturing. Mexico and Canada are true largest trading partners. So if you're going to rip up a trade agreement that has shown positives for the United States, I disagree with Mr. Trump that it has taken jobs. Yes, are companies like Ford going to move small truck manufacturers they're still making lots of vehicles in this country. And so there's going to be a balance there. And when you want to talk about moving those small truck manufacturing off to Mexico, do you still want to be able to have an economically feasible truck to sell to the middle class and to people in this country? So there's more to it than just the bombast of saying, you know, trade has been bad. Hillary's not much better on that, I don't think. I mean, sure, once being for TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership Act, that's an important act for the country as well, because it is building the trade relationships in the Southeast Asian sector especially. And if we're not there, if we don't have those kind of trade agreements, where are those countries going to operate? They're going to be lost to, I think, the Chinese and going through that part of the world there. So from a national standpoint, I'm not terribly excited about either of them and mainly on the trade issue.
What about the tax issue? Yesterday, Trump said he's gonna lower taxes 20% for corporations. Is that something that manufacturers see as a shiny object they're attracted to?
I think what the national tax policy, and you hear both candidates address it in different fashions. We are one of the highest tax corporate in the world. We want to double tax dollars that are earned by American companies overseas to bring and repatriate that money. You hear a lot of discussion about that. I think that's the area that manufacturers, especially our large corporate companies, are looking at. Where that's going to go, is it going to go more of a direction of making it more difficult or higher rates, which you tend to get from some on the Democratic side, to what Trump is saying on that. But specifics, we've not seen a lot there.
When you talk about broadening the tax base here in Illinois, what do you mean by that? Is it taxing services?
Yes, yes. I mean, Wisconsin taxes about 35 different services. We're already pregnant in the service tax arena. We have a tax on electricity, as an example. You have 5% utility tax statewide. Many municipalities have an additional 5%. Why is it that when I go pick up my shirts at the cleaners, I don't have to pay any sales tax? I go right next door to buy some pet food, I pay sales tax. Why is it that various items in the grocery store, some are considered food, some are not? The sales tax needs to be revamped, and it does need to be broadened. And with all due respect to my friends in the business community that complain about adding to the sales tax, well, you're really becoming a tax collector, and we're paying you for the privilege of collecting that tax. So we think that you can broaden it. It is additional that I don't believe will be terribly regressive on people, and that should be part of an overall tax restructuring.
Wisconsin also has a progressive income tax. Is that something that?
No, I think that's an advantage we have in having a flat tax in this state.
Is there any, is it legitimate that there are concerns of a recession just around the corner, and what could that do to Illinois' manufacturing?
Well, I always say our members are canaries in the coal mine, and I was talking this morning. This is as tough a year in getting dues and membership to re-up, and it's sort of tells you what's going on out there. Your speed of pay when you send out a dues payment. It has lengthened out this year, and I think that in the manufacturing sector in Illinois, it is a very slow time right at the moment. We saw this occurring in 2007 before the recession really hit then. And we saw our members coming out of the recession in 2009 and 2010 before really things were over. So in many ways, the small and medium-sized manufacturers sort of portends what's going on. And I would say that there is a slowdown out there right now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thanks, folks.
Thomas.